After spending nearly a decade in prison for tax evasion, Al Capone is released to be with his family in Palm Island, Florida. Though he is seen as no longer a threat, he and his family remain under federal watch. However, Capone is no longer the man he used to be, because at the age of 40, he has succumbed to dementia. His mind is rotting due to neurosyphilis, he has hallucinations, he loses control of his motor functions, he's in a really bad state. And this film chronicles the final days of his life. You can basically imagine this movie as the tale of how Frank Sheeran spent the rest of his life at the end of The Irishman. Yes, Capone is not your typical kind of biopic. I thought it was going to be a crime drama of sorts, but it's more of a psychological drama. This is really a personal story about the end of one's life. And I thought it was an interesting one since, even though I am a Chicagoan, I don't know jack about Al Capone. But unfortunately, I didn't learn much about him anyway, aside from the fact that he spent the last year of his life suffering from a brain disease. I wish I could have learned more about Capone's criminal life as he ran the Chicago outfit during the Prohibition era, but I respect the story that Josh Trank was trying to tell here. There is something inherently interesting about watching someone live out the little life they have left. A similar approach was taken with the Judy Garland biopic just last year, but this is undeniably a Josh Trank film. It has that dark tone and dreary aesthetic that is present in all of his movies. Only this time, Trank was able to make exactly the type of film that he wanted to make. There was no studio interference, there was no production drama, there was no executive to rob Trank of his creative vision. Trank had all the freedom he wanted, and he made precisely the type of film that he wanted to. For that, I am happy for Trank. However, it's unfortunate that Capone ended up not being such a great movie anyway. Capone just isn't all that captivating. Watching a well-known criminal slowly lose his mind is an interesting premise, one that can easily hook you in, especially with the promise of a solid Tom Hardy performance, but there's no story to really keep your investment. Capone has a very razor-thin plot. Al hid away up to $10 million, but due to his mental state, he doesn't remember where. So he becomes overly paranoid and believes people are out to find his money. But that plotline isn't really the focus of the film. It just kind of exists. It'll come in and out of the movie, hoping to keep you engaged, even though there's nothing else happening in the narrative. And while I do think it's fascinating to watch someone's mental state deteriorate, I'm not really sure how I was supposed to feel as I watched these events unfold. It's very unclear as to what Josh Trank is actually trying to say here. Is he trying to shine some light on a very serious subject? Or is he trying to make fun of Al Capone by highlighting the fact that he couldn't control his own bowel movements right before he died? I don't know what kind of message Trank is trying to communicate, so I don't know how to feel about what he shows me. Should I be feeling bad for Capone? He's clearly become a shell of a man. Or should I feel like Capone got what he deserved? He was a violent murderer who led a criminal organization after all. The film just does a terrible job at establishing tone. The tone of a movie is usually supposed to tell you how you should feel, but Capone never finds the right tone to strike. It can be overly serious while being unintentionally hilarious at the same time. And it's hard to separate the genuine comedic moments with the unintentionally funny ones, which just makes the more dramatic moments feel less impactful. Tom Hardy's performance, for example, is just awful. I honestly don't know what Hardy and Trank were going for here. Hardy has this horribly raspy voice that sounds like someone just kicked Nick Nolte in the nuts, and it's very harsh on the ears. I hated listening to whenever Hardy had to speak. I don't know why he always has to have a weird, muffled, gruffy voice in every one of his performances, but it's starting to get a little annoying. Hardy is just so over the top in this film, he felt like he belonged in an SNL parody skit more than an actual feature-length drama. I mean, I think he was trying to give a more serious performance, but it just comes across as comical. and not in a good way. I wasn't able to see Hardy as Al Capone because all I could see was a version of Eddie Brock who was just suffering from having the Venom symbiote inside his head for too long. I don't know, Trank and Hardy really shit the bed with this performance, unfortunately, and in this case, I mean that quite literally. And then there's the editing. Capone features some of the worst editing I've seen in a long time. There are so many jarring cuts in each and every scene. I was honestly starting to feel frustrated. Think of the terribly edited scene in Bohemian Rhapsody where Queen meets John Reed for the first time, and imagine an entire movie being put together like that. The editing is so bad, it's laughable. But one could argue that Trank was intentionally making poor editing choices to mimic Al Capone's mental state. Trank's quick cuts and odd pacing might purposefully be trying to disorient you, as if the off-putting structure of every scene was meant to make you feel like you're Al Capone suffering from dementia. But as you watch the movie, it doesn't come across that way. It just felt like Trank didn't know how to edit a movie together. So if Trank was trying to make a serious and dramatic movie, he failed spectacularly because almost every creative decision in this film is unintentionally funny. But if he was trying to be humorous, then that comes across as a little tasteless, because that humor is coming at the expense of someone who suffered from a real and deadly illness. And I'm sure plenty of people can attest to the fact that having a family member with dementia is no laughing matter. But I don't know if anything in this movie even matters at all. There are no rules. Plot lines don't lead anywhere, certain characters just disappear completely, and other characters are revealed to be imaginary even though they were properly introduced outside of Al Capone's head. Nothing is properly established, so Trank had an anything goes mentality on this film, I guess. So I think we've learned a valuable lesson here. Sometimes, a little studio interference is necessary to ring in a director's crazy ideas. Too much interference will result in a visionless mess like Fantastic, and not enough interference can lead a director to go a bit overboard. But film is an artistic medium, and sometimes art is made with a bit of compromise. Am I glad that Trank got to make the movie he wanted to make in the exact way that he wanted to make it? Of course I am. That's any director's dream. But I actually think I know less about Capone than I did before I started watching this movie. I like Trank's ideas for the film. Al Capone was a well-known crime boss, but not a lot of people probably knew about how he spent his final days. And in this movie, Trank was able to show a side of Capone that people were unfamiliar with. He was able to show Capone at his worst. Dying in middle age, racked with guilt and paranoia, and being alienated from the closest people around him. That is an inherently interesting concept, but the execution of said concept was disappointingly unengaging. I think the only aspect of this film that I actually enjoyed was Linda Cardellini's performance as May Capone. I really felt for her character because you can tell just how draining and exhausting it must have been to care for someone in Capone's condition. We get the sense that May loves Al, but that doesn't mean she can't have a breaking point and feel the need to smack him every once in a while. And it did feel cathartic to watch Cardellini smack Tom Hardy because his performance was just too much to bear at times. I love the guy, but Cardellini is clearly the steady rock in this film. She should be in more stuff. So I hope Trank is able to make a full comeback someday. I don't particularly love his work. I've never actually seen Fantastic, and I thought Chronicle was pretty okay, but who doesn't love a good comeback story? I think it would be great if Trank was able to make a smash hit movie that critics and fans alike just adore, while also crushing it at the box office. So it's probably a good thing that he didn't end up directing a Boba Fett film. Who knows how that would have turned out? Star Wars fans can be brutal, and if the movie was a disaster, then I don't know how Trank would have recovered. Hopefully, Trank will be able to take his past experiences and make better movies in the future, and Boba Fett's character can be done justice in The Mandalorian. But for now, I would likely give Capone 2 out of 5 stars. Thanks for watching.